right, we're just about ready. I forgot my glasses, so this may be interesting today. I'm going to use my third eye. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I want to welcome you to our Wednesday morning class, coming to you today from HeartLight Spiritual Center here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We want to welcome you that are here in person and you that are joining us online wherever you are. You know we are one in spirit and we're all together. So we certainly are turning our classes over to the guidance of our inner spirit. We call the Holy Spirit to teach us. We're in a series of teachings trying to set what I call a context to a content. That makes sense to you? In other words, the Bible is kind of content, and other sacred things are content. But what is the context? What is the environment? What is the background? What was the influence of these things? And we have to understand that words by themselves are just dead letter. The life of a word that's been written is definition. So to find the definitions gives us where the power really is. So we're continuing on with studying the Near East culture and the language that most likely Yeshua Mashiach, which is Jesus Christ, learned, which was Aramaic. So we're going to continue on in that direction today, okay? So we've been through the idioms. Can somebody tell me what an idiom is?
When you say
Cindy?
something and it means something different?
Mm-hmm. You say something, but you know it means something different than what you are saying. Can you give me a few examples of idioms that we use in an English language?
Raining
Cats and dogs.
Stop dragging your feet.
Okay. Yeah. There's tons of them. We use them every day. Every day, I don't even think about it. And so the Bible is written in at least 40% idioms. So how can you understand what they really said if you don't know the content of what they were really saying? And that's what we're learning here. So we start out, for you that are new, we start out with this with the recognition that no one spoke English in the Bible. Now when you take things like Course in Miracles, Science of Mind, Unity's teachings, Fillmore's, those are directly English language. They're not translations of Eastern language. They originated in the English language. But when you come to ancient texts, such as the Bible, and such as probably the other major texts of monotheistic religions, you pretty much have to understand what you're reading and the meaning of what you are reading to understand what's really being said. So as I say, and I start out with this every Wednesday, that was the thing that changed me almost 60 years ago when I started my path, was if nobody spoke English in the Bible, what did they say? And I really wanted to understand what they were saying in the culture and time that they were living. A lot of literalist Christians who base their faith on the literalism of the Bible certainly do not understand that important point, that all of that was written in a context of a culture that most of us who live in the West did not grow up in. Now, as things begin to change for me, and probably for a lot of people in the 80s, as we begin to come back into more meditation Shirley MacLaine and her book and all of that, and people begin to come. I was one of those people that came toward transcendental meditation, and all of that began to get more popular in the 80s as it was in the 60s. So there was kind of a lull of what was popular in the 60s because of kind of the craziness of the 60s didn't quite accomplish what we had hoped it would do, and therefore there was kind of a lull until the 80s, and then there was a kind of a renewal of this idea of meditation and the importance of it, and spirituality. Many of us, including myself, I can't speak for you, but I was very drawn toward Eastern sounding music for meditation. I did not do well with Western music at all, because Western music is based on a closed octave 12-tone temperament scale of 440A. And other cultures do not use the 440A, but they use like 444 and 432 and other frequencies. So the whole thing of music in the West has been for the purposes of boxing us in. And that's what it means, octave to octave. And you close the octave, that is called boxed in music or 12-tone temperament music. Then we learned that the genius of Pythagoras, about 500 or 600 years before the manifestation of the Christ, was a visionary in the understanding that everything was pretty much connected by sound. He somehow just knew that if planets and heavenly bodies were out there in space, staying in space, that they had to be spinning in an orbit. And then he understood if everything is spinning in an orbit, it must be making a sound. It's got a vibration to it that's making a sound. Now, when I came in, I said, what is that sound? What is that sound? So I guess you brought that? The sound of, yeah. So during the yoga, you was hearing the sound of Saturn. The sound of Saturn was being played in the background of yoga today, yeah. So he understood that a long, long time ago, and his genius was that he did not close the octave. When he did not close the octave, he found the spiral, the vortex, which is one of the most spiritual, powerful signs in the universe. So anyway, that's what that was about. So we have to go a little bit more deeper into understanding these kind of things. George Lamsa wrote the Near Eastern Ancient Bible, in which he declares that most of the Bible, 40%, is Aramaic idioms. I personally believe even more than 40% are idioms. So let's continue on. We're in on chapter 3 in our Let It Be Light book, which is mysticism. We're talking about mysticism. The Bible reports two forms of mysticism. There's a mundane mysticism and a spiritual. The mundane mysticism is knowledge gained through personal, subjective experience of insight and intuition. Spiritual mysticism is a way of knowing that transcends ordinary circumstances of the physical appearance of persons, places, and things. In other words, it is inner knowledge, the inner knowing that all things have a spiritual component to it, and that everything is always working toward the highest and good of all things. Everything is always evolving itself and changing basically itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this word mysticism, which comes from the word, I guess, mystery. So I want to talk just a little bit on the mystery of God. Or really, God is the mystery. But there is a phrase called the mystery of God. And I looked up and did research on this term mystery a long time ago, and I found it interesting. But it said mystery due to religious rite or ceremony. In other words, some what religion, organized religion, has done, it has taken something that is really quite a simple spiritual principle and made it become mysterious to the minds of the people. And when it became so mysterious to the minds of the people and the people's minds shut down, then they became vulnerable to be led and guided by the religion or the church in some way. So what that was saying to me is that those who control the religion has made God become a mystery. God in its own nature is not a mystery, but it's made it become a mystery. So they could then define God to us rather than us knowing what God is in us. And I'm using the term God for communication. You know how I kind of feel about that. So we could say source, we can say many different things if you're more comfortable than the God word, because the God word does carry some baggage in some cases. But really we shouldn't let it, because when we say God, we know something different than what people believe in the old man out in the sky somewhere, the anthropomorphic God that we made in our image and likeness. We need to know the one who made us in its likeness and image, not the one we made in a likeness and image. So this word mystery is quite interesting. And it says, when the mystery of God is finished, there'll be no more delays, or time shall be no more. And the word there, delay, means we would use it as blockage. There'll be no more blockages. Blocking the essence of the life force from flowing freely through us, through the human system, which feeds our bodies, our minds, and our spirit as well. Most of the revelations and experiences that was in the Bible was through dreams, visions, and revelations, which played a major role in the Bible. For instance, when God revealed himself to the prophets and patriarchs, he usually did so through dreams, visions, and revelation. And how do we know this? The scripture testifies to the fact that in various places, this does not imply, however, that dreams and visions are the only means of spiritual guidance and communication. So let's talk about dream, because this word dream kind of fascinates me how it's used. People talk about the American dream. The American dream. Now we know what that means. It means people who have aspirations, want to fulfill those aspirations in some way, and that's considered their dream. But the dream comes from a medieval English word that can mean, on one side, to deceive. But on the other side, it can mean an aspiration. So it is a word, kahilma, if that interested in that word, it's an Aramaic word, Khelma, which means dream, but this means to heal. So what I'm saying to you is, in English, we're pretty much black and white, this and that people. We like a no or a yes or this or that. But in Near Eastern language, that was not the case, because so many of the words are being translated many different words in English. In other words, there's not one translation of one Aramaic word and one equal to English. There might be 6 English words that would represent the one Aramaic word, or in Hebrew or any of the other languages. Do you understand that? So if you look up these words in Strong's in the languages of Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, you might find 6 or 7 different words. And then people say to me, well, how do I know which one of the words? That's where your own intuition comes in. You get what's called a resonance with something when you're reading the list, and you kind of have a knowing. So I like that because of the fact that leaves this up to you and not somebody else to tell you what it is. You have to come to it yourself. And we're for anything that empowers, not disempowers. With me?
Yes.
So, We know there is Adam's dream. And a deep sleep came upon Adam. And the thing that's fascinating is, when did he wake up? When did he wake up? Didn't say he woke up until he had gone through enough of his incarnations to become an awakened Adam, which is represented in the archetype of Yeshua, Jesus the teacher. Because it says that Adam went to sleep. That means in that state of sleep, he had a dream. Now, another word we could substitute for dream there is illusion. He went into an illusion about himself, an illusion about most everything that he knew. He began to forget as he began to connect more with the perception of things in the dream state. Then it says when Yeshua came along, he was the last Adam. So all the way from this first character, all the way through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jeremiah, Isaiah, all these prophets represents the stages of Adam's incarnation and reincarnation until he emerges as the awakened Adam. He was awake. So he woke out of the dream or out of the illusion. So it's a touchy word to use, this word dream, because it has so many different meanings. And we have to understand what's the context of the meaning which is being given to us by the Spirit. What is Spirit telling us? Is it telling us about the dream that man's in, that's mentioned in the Course of Miracles? Course of Miracles teaches that we live in the dream, in the illusion, and that we're asleep, and we're dreaming all this stuff. It's not real. It's just all happening in our head. And then the five senses puts us out there, and we think it's all out there. And it's out there so much that it starts taking on form of itself, and we call that the world. We live in the world. But here's the key. You want to live in the world, but not be of the world. So what we are reaching out for here at HeartLight and other, I think, New Thought spiritual communities across the world is looking is to help people to wake up out of the dream and to become spiritually awake to who we have been created to be and have always been. We didn't lose it. We didn't lose it. We just forgot it. And now we have to remember exactly who and what we are. So I like books. As you know, I'm not big on the Old Testament, Yahwehism, but I do think that there are important books in the Old Testament. So again, I ask you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to understand that some of these books are more poetically understood, such as Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Book of Job. These were never meant to be literal books. They are just stories of archetypes and parables that has been passed down from generation to generation. So in the book of Job, for example, we're told, "For God speak once, and he does not speak a second time. But he eventually speaks through a dream, through a vision at the night when sleep falls upon mankind, while in deep slumber upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men." I really like that. So in the King James, it says God spake once and God spake twice, and man perceiveth it not. So what did that mean? It means God spoke through two different testaments and covenants. The old covenant, he spoke through law. And man perceiveth it not and came short of everything under law. Therefore, there was a need to enter into a new covenant or a new agreement called the New Testament covenant. And from that came the church age or the age of grace. So we moved out of law and we moved into the age of grace, and that's where we've been for 2,000 years, ever since the teachings of Yeshua came to the earth, which was based not upon the law but upon grace. Up unto him, you had tried to keep 613 different laws contained in ordinances. You know, not eating shrimp, can't wear linen with cotton. I mean, this bizarre stuff that was the law contained in ordinances. And of course, nobody could do it, nobody did it, and everybody failed and law failed. So there was a need for grace. Grace just meant that we entered a state of consciousness in which the divine said, I will receive you and accept you where you are and who you are right now. You don't have to become anything other than who you are. So come unto me, all of you that labor, heavy load, and I will give you rest. That was the message of grace. Grace was to everybody. It was grace. The Old Testament was to the few, the chosen, and that was race. You were who you are by the race, by having the Hebrew blood, and all of that was definitely who you were. And that all went. I'm proposing to you that we are at the beginning of a third covenant. Everybody thinks everything's done when the Bible was written, but it is not. We're entering into a whole new negotiation for a whole better covenant than even grace was. So basically what I'm saying to you is what we're experiencing, even here at HeartLight, it's harder and harder to get people to come out into kind of a church setting, which we try not to be, but we still are on some levels, is that the church age has pretty much fulfilled itself and is over. So you're going to see something different. I'm not sure what it is yet. No more than they knew as they moved from law to grace. What in the world's going on? Can you imagine how different it must have been compared to all the rituals and the rites and the laws that they had done for thousands of years, and now something new was coming in that they didn't understand. So we don't know what it is either, other than we need to be open for it and allow it to come through us, whatever this third thing is. So let me say it to you. God spake once, Old Testament. God spake twice, New Testament, but man didn't get it or perceive it. So it says, how is God going to speak the third time? To man as he lays upon his bed in dreams and in visions, he shall show mankind its uprightness. So what you're getting ready to see is an individual visitation of spirit to people. People's going to start accessing their higher self in their dreams and their visions, and it's going to happen to them individually, not through the church. Not through the church. Not through the priest. Not through the guru. Not through the minister. That's all gone. Now we can facilitate and we can give you the space and the time and we can help you through it, but this has got to be your own personalized experience of enlightenment. And that's where we're kind of entering into. So I just want to say that about this dream state thing that we're into right now. Okay, so dreams and visions, revelations play a major role in the Bible. For instance, when God reveals himself to prophets, it's always through the dreams. Okay, we've established that. We've established the meaning of the word dream, which can mean to heal, and it can also mean to deceive. So you can be deceived by the dream, or you can be healed in your mind by the dream. It's which side of the dream are you on? When we read the Bible, how can we tell whether we are reading a mystical incident or a historical event? There are key phrases that can help us to recognize the difference between the more psychic or spiritual aspect and the historical. In many passages, the writers plainly state that the occurrence is a dream or a vision. Sometimes an author may not explicitly say so, but will use one of the following expressions. Here's some of them. The angel of the Lord appeared. I was in the Spirit. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. The word of Spirit came to me saying, and I saw. And the Spirit appeared to Moses in a symbol, which we all know the burning bush is a symbol of something that was shown. So there are also times when no specific key phrase introduces a mystical event. When this occurs, the only way to discern the happening is to realize that whatever God and men or angels and men or God are entering into holding a conversation with our spirit to spirit. So everything has to come into your spirit first, and then the spirit gives it to the soul, and the soul gives it to the body. So this brings us to understanding the greatest of all languages, which is the language of spirit. The language of spirit, which is not English, which is not Aramaic, which is not Greek, but is the language of knowing and remembering. It is the epiphanies of our experience and our ahas of our experience that makes all the difference in those areas of our life. So, let's look here a little bit where I'm trying to see where I want to go today. There's so much here that I don't want to go the wrong way with you. Let's take a few things here. In Matthew 1:19 says, he knew her. In Aramaic, it is, he had intercourse with her. So Adam knew Eve, it says. Mm-hmm. Adam knew Eve. Now, the term following the star is walking in the direction of the stars. The baptism of fire is a cleansing experience. Unifying another man's shoes, respect and meekness. So you see, all these things have a language of their own and a meaning of their own that only the culture would have understood. Now, the only reason that I'm doing this is because I believe this is a part of fulfilling the New Testament or the church age. One thing that we do not want to do is to go over into the next covenant or order with unfinished business. Now, what it said, Jesus said about the Old Testament was, I did not come to destroy the law, but I came to fulfill it. There's a difference. I'm not here to destroy. I'm not that crazy sometimes about my Christian background as it was. It was pretty rough. But I'm not here to try to destroy Christianity. I'm here to kind of dismantle it so it can be rebuilt upon a true foundation of spirituality than man-made doctrine. So I don't want to be the enemy of anything. I just know there's people that needs to redo some of these things that we have been so influenced to believe is the truth that really isn't the truth in that sense. So, there's so many things here I want to talk about. Let's take the term devil. The term devil refers to a crazy or insane, an insane person or a crazy action that was called the devil. So, idol worship, for instance, was considered devil worship by the Hebrews. They believed it was crazy or insane to worship an idol, reasoning that since idols were made by man, there would be no life in them. Yet idols in stone and wood were venerated, bowed to, and kissed by their worshipers. To the Hebrews, this was crazy, and hence devil worship. To the Hebrews, certain religious authorities became angry and said to Jesus, Say we not well that thou art a Samaritan and that thou hast a devil? In John 8:48. That meant you are not a true adherent of the Jewish faith and you're crazy. A mentally and emotionally ill of that day is considered to be devils or devil possessed. Their speech and actions were not normal, so people would say they had an evil or unclean spirit. Now that could be today what we would call someone who had an epileptic fit. Now we would not treat that like it was some entity or a demon or a devil. We would treat it like an illness. But they didn't have a word back in those days for all these different diagnosis of mankind psychologically and physically and whatever. So kind of when they said it was the devil, that's kind of a blank. We don't know what it is, but it's not pretty. And then by the time we get into the medieval systems of things like that, and they begin to do the amphitheaters and whatever, they kind of went toward this idea of the villain, the victim, and the hero. So when it came to how can people know who the villain is, they designed a suit, a red suit with horns and a hoof that would wear that in the play so that people would know that's the bad one. That's the evil one. And of course we see that in art and pictures today as we try to make the devil this grotesque entity being with horns and hoofs and all this crazy stuff. Jesus turned to Peter, who challenged him and said to Peter, Satan, get behind me. He wasn't talking to some entity, he was talking to Peter and calling Peter. The word Satan or devil, which means adversary. That's all it meant. You're being an adversary to me right now. So I don't want to stay on that word, but it's a word that I hear so much out there in the fundamentalist churches of called deliverance ministry. I was a part of that many years ago, and it was the craziest thing you ever saw. I could tell you stories about casting out demons and devils and people doing weird stuff and crazy things like that. And I just think we need to understand that anything that as adversarial toward our truth, toward our highest good, is seen as an adversary in some way. So that's all that the devil kind of was at that point.
David, so the devil's not like negative energy?
Good point. Okay, let's talk about that. Do I believe that there is a force out there? Yes. But it's our making. When you put a lot of fear-based negative type energy and thoughts together, it will eventually take on some kind of a form. And we do have that out there. I don't know if I want to get into that, but I do believe that we project ourselves into these entities. You know, I think we're angels, I think we're devils, I think we're everything. You know, and it's all coming from our belief systems, what we believe, what we're taught, how we speak. that when enough people believe something, it will at some point reach a point in which it takes on a form of some kind. So yes, I do believe that there is a not so good influence out there in the world today, but I think we're not victims to it. I think it's parts of ourself. And the more that we heal that part of ourself, the more it diminishes its power. Okay, good point. Thank you. That's a good question, because I think it's hard for us to continue in a place where we're totally ignoring any kind of adversity out there, because it's just there. It's just there. But if we take the responsibility of making these things, then we can take the responsibility of dismantling them and dispowering them. And that's why we want to be in the mind of spirit in some way. Okay. Let me get to this book. I like it real well. Okay, approximately 500 years later, Jesus of Nazareth instructed two of his disciples to go to Bethlehem, where they would find a donkey that was tied to a colt, and they were to bring the animals to him. They brought the donkey and the colt, and they put the garments on the colt, and Jesus rode upon it. And a very large crowd spread its garments on the road, and others cut down branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds which were going before him and behind him were shouting and saying, "Victory to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, victory of the highest." Matthew 21. In the East, and this is what I want to share with you, in the East, only the very poor would ride on a donkey. Never princes or noblemen, because the ass usually signified disgrace, rejection, and humility. Giggle, 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 giggle. I know, giggle. But that's what they were. Long before it ever became the part of your anatomy, it was a donkey, a stubborn donkey. In many towns in the East today, there's old tradition prevail. The ancient custom of parading a disgraced person on a donkey is still practiced. Any individual who was considered to be a heretic of teachings or who might have been immoral in character was punished and humiliated by the manner. So, isn't it interesting that Jesus chose to ride into Jerusalem on the back of the donkey? For a specific reason. He did not want to receive he did not want to be an earthly political king. He represented the old ideas of the ancient rulers of Israel who had lived among the people in meekness and in humility, and not as overlords. Now, I'm reading this because when I read this, I thought this is really close to the time we're living in. See, the overlords can represent those who are over the world and the world systems of today. And where people are failing is the fact we've become so political that we think our answer is political. That means we've got to get the right person into that White House. So they're going to save us. I'm old enough that I've been through enough elections that I've gotten excited about some of the elections of who that person was and how they're going to lead us out of the land of Egypt into the promised land with the milk and honey flow, only to become disillusioned and disappointed within a couple of years or 4 years and tell it all, let's get another one. So right now, we really think that the right political figures are going to lead us out of this situation that we have found ourselves here in this country and actually around the world. So let's look at this. You have to excuse me, I forgot my glasses. That's why I'm stumbling a little bit, because I forgot my glasses. So I'm trying to read this. He represented the old ideas of ancient rulers who were more meek and humble and not as overlords. Jesus also knew. Now, when I speak of Jesus, I'm talking about the archetype you. You are Jesus. You're the archetype of Jesus. I'm not talking about just theology and historical 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about what does this represent within us. He knew he was to be disgraced by the priestly authorities and was to die the death of a blasphemer, of a common criminal on the cross. His destiny as a ruler of the world was not along political lines. So this is what I wish we could get over to people, that there's a better way of helping our situation without taking on the clothing of the politician. There's a better way. But his destiny lay in another direction other than through the political. But you can understand the people that followed him at that time wanted him to be political. They wanted him to be the king of the Jews so that he would lead them out of the military experience of that day and what was going on, and he didn't want to be. And they're the first ones that reject him was his own people, because he was not being who they wanted him to be. Jesus' entry into Jerusalem was a political failure, but on the other hand, it was a moral and spiritual triumph. The poor, the peasants, and the children welcomed him, but the high officials rejected him. In spite of this rejection, Jesus succeeded in demonstrating the non-political, non-material, and non-partisan kingdom of his actions and of his teachings. His entry into Jerusalem struck a devastating blow to the political aspirations of his disciples. It collapsed the dreams and hopes of a militant leader to solve the problems of Israel or the world. The picture that Jesus represented and demonstrated had nothing to do with political influence or military might. Behold, the King of the universe rides triumphantly upon a colt, the foal of an ass. Sounds to me like he didn't really buy into trickled down economy. Seems like he realized it was from the bottom. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because he could have run for office, he could have been of the Sanhedrin court, he could have been a Pharisee, he could have been a Sadducee, he could have had a great label of power and political influence, but no, he comes riding in on a colt which represents the average people. I really like that. I'm trying to help some of you have a better relationship with Jesus, because I think a lot of you are still wrestling with your old teachings of the religions you grew up of a Jesus that is not the true one that I know anyway. And spiritual values and attributes constitute a healthy, wholesome, balanced life. No kingdom or nation can survive or know the ultimate in peace and joy until spiritual values are established in the nation of the kingdom. America needs teachings and establishing itself into spiritual principles, not new political laws and ordinances. We need to return how to respect one another, for instance. and how to stop labeling each other and classifying each other and ranking each other. All of that needs to go. I've said if you got rid of every label for 24 hours, you'd transform the world. We've lost the essence of who we are. We've lost the spirit of who we are because we're so caught up in all the labels and all the political and religious labels that have been given to us that we've lost ourselves. But the eternal values of the human spirit are from everlasting to everlasting. The kingdom of God has no political ties with any particular nation. It belongs to the people of all nations and kingdoms. Wisdom and peace reign freely in the kingdom of heaven. And when the leadership of this world is dominated by heavenly wisdom and power, then peace and prosperity will manifest all over the earth. They can clap on that. Why not? Sounds good to me. So here we are. Here we are. Here you are. Here I am. And here we are together, sharing this wonderful place in consciousness. Many of us have been on this path for a few decades. Some newer, some older, but we've all arrived at this point in consciousness in this place. Where much has been given, much is required. So I'm looking out my backyard because where I live is a lot of trees behind me. I live kind of a little forest. And I loved it because I noticed there's several little trees that are blooming, but not all of them. There's one here, there's one there, just as green as it can be, and the others still look dead as they can be. And remember how I've talked to you so much about the first fruits? How then a harvest there are those that come to fruition first, knowing that the rest are coming. Now, in religion, which has been a total failure to me, is missionary programs and conversion techniques. Knocking on doors, trying to convert people, trying to get people to believe what we want them to believe, and all of that. That just has not worked. And millions of dollars have gone into these kind of things to try to save the uncivilized. You know, you got to save the Native Americans. You got to save the African Americans and slavery and all that kind of thing. This has been going, and it's just a failure. It has not worked because that's not the more excellent way to do that. It's going to be through example of someone seeing the fruition of divine principle and divine law manifesting itself in the human experience. What does that mean? That means you and I are now responsible to learn how to actually manifest and extend love that is unconditional. And if you're not being challenged in that area, then I don't know what to tell you. But we're all so easily divided and so don't like each other's thinking and who we are, that it's easy even for us to get into that thing of we don't like so-and-so and we don't like what they stand for. It doesn't matter whether we like them or not like them. It's okay if you don't want to like what everybody you don't agree with. But love is accepting them for where they are. That's our requirement right now, is to love. Man, and I got to think about that sometimes, because, you know, I can name a few names of people that really like. But you know, I have to keep in touch with that part of myself that is them, and that part of them that's me. because I teach that. I've taught that for years, that there's only one begotten. Only one begotten expression of the universal source. Just one. It's not me and them. It's not Republican and Democrat. It's not believer and non-believer. It's not capitalist and socialist. It's just us. We have to practice it. We have to ask that higher part of ourselves to help us, to catch ourselves when we fall into those egoic trappings of being nasty to people or about people. And I'm not up here telling you that I've got it all together, because I have my moments where I get knocked out consciously. You know, I mean, I'm a human being and I have my choices of what I think is right, but so do they. They think they're right. May not be my right, but it's their right. In many ways, it's their right to think what they do. How am I going to help them by resisting them and fighting them? I'm just going to make it worse. I'm feeding the illusion.
And you're keeping it alive.
Mm-hmm. And keeping it alive. So I don't think we can do this with our human aspect of how we love, because I think we should just admit that the way humans love is conditional. I'm not sure you can make it any other way. It's just conditional. It takes, God is love. Call it what you will. It takes that kind of divine agape love flowing through you in spite of you that I'm talking about. It's not the mental construct of, oh yes, I'm a spiritual person, I'm supposed to love. That will not work. It takes allowing. Remember we talked about earlier how that we live in the world or the dream of illusion? Again, another thing I'm going to give to Yeshua, Jesus, is that, how do I say that? Okay. Jesus represents someone who came into the dream but stayed awake in the dream. So I said to myself, what does Jesus represent as me? And it says it represents you awake in the dream. Mm-hmm. Or we say, be in the world but not of the world. You can be in the dream but not of the dream. So at some point, and I don't know how this is going to happen here at HeartLight, but there's going to have to be more of a, let's just not talk about it, teach it, and sing it, but let's practice it. I don't know how that's going to happen, but we need more ability to practice the attributes of the divine in ourselves. And we can start with, I'll tell you where you start, yourself. Can you truly accept and unconditionally love yourself? If you can do that, you're on your way. You're on the right path. Then there's those, even in this small community, that sometimes can push your buttons. How can you handle that differently without getting caught up in judgment? Or you're wrong and I'm right. How do we do that? How do we practice that? If we can do it with ourselves and we can do it with each other, we might be ready to go out into the world and start letting all of this begin to appear in the world of illusion. So you represent the first fruits of those little trees out in my backyard. I'm looking at the trees, but everything still looks pretty dead out there. But they're not. And remember, nobody's dead out there. They look it.
Might even act
They might act it, but they're not. So I hope you kind of understand what I'm attempting to say here is we've got to go to the next step. How do we break this down into a way that this whole spiritual idea can live us? I've tried to live it, it doesn't work. I've got 60 years of trying to live for God, live in a way to make Jesus happy, live in a way the church would accept me and validate me, and it's been failure after failure after failure because I cannot do it through my own human works. It can't be done. It is first discovering who you are. That's where it starts. Who you are. And when you understand that you are a divine being in a human incarnation, you realize that divine being has its own principles and character and nature. And that's what it means in Jesus' name. Every time it says in the name of Jesus, in the name of that, it means in the nature of. Not the name, like we know a name. I'm convinced that Jesus never knew his name as Jesus when he walked this earth. That came into translation much later, that he became Jesus. But that's why I call him Yeshua in the Hebrew. I don't know. The point was he was the Christ. I don't care what his fleshly name was. I want to know what his spiritual name was. And it was the nature of God in him, the Christ, that's in all of us. Our time's about to get away. So I think what I'm trying to get you to see is maybe Jesus is not such a bad archetype for you to look at outside of religion, outside of Christianity. And we need an archetype. We need someone who has done it, that looks like us, has been through all the things, and that's why we have to give humanity back to Jesus. Give him his humanity back. Because that's what we're dealing with, is our humanity. How did he go through being a male? How did he go through being a Jew? And he was a Jew because he was of the house of Judah, is what makes him a Jew. Not all Israelites were Jews, but he was because he was of the tribe of Judah, which the nickname for Judah is Jew. So he truly was a Jew. And yet a lot of Jewish people don't like him, and he's a Jew. I figured that one out, but anyway.
Because they stigmatize the name.
They do, and that's exactly what has happened, and I'm trying to steal it back. And realize that I'm not going to argue his name is Jesus or Yeshua. What I'm trying to find out, he was the nature of God incarnated into the human story. And that's your story. It's in your story and my story that the story of creation is awakening and shaking us from our sleep and waking us from the dream of illusion and saying, arise and shine, for your light has come and my glory has risen in you, through you, and as it goes out into the world and covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. Take a breath. Let us pray or acknowledge the inner teacher of ourselves. Again, I confirm that I am not the teacher today. I'm only doing myself to facilitate for the teacher that lives in each and every one of us. A teacher that guides, a teacher that leads, a teacher who holds all the universal truth that every one of us need individually to experience our quickening and enlightenment is in us right now. We lack nothing. We need nothing, for everything that we need has already been given to us as our birthright. The teacher within also brings to remembrance all the things that we have forgotten as we come into the density of a third dimensional body. But we are here because we have said at some level, I want to wake up from the illusion of separation. We asked the Holy Spirit to allow us to expand our consciousness just a little more today for coming together, because we know we can grow faster together than we can alone. So guide us and lead us here at HeartLight in ways that we can continue to become more aware and awake to your kingdom within us, to your peace within us, to your joy within us. Breathe in to the count of 5. Exhale to the count of 8. And let's do a Fibonacci golden mean breath 3 times. You're going to breathe in 5 and out 8. Those are Fibonacci numbers. In, out 8. In 5. And out 8. In 5. Out 8. Return to the natural flow of your breath. All right, I want to thank you so much. All right, thank you for continuing to support this class so that we can continue to keep it going. If you're with us still online, please consider your support also to us here at HeartLight. You can do it online through credit card or PayPal, or if you still do checks and things like that, you can send it to 7300 Mallard Creek Road here in Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. But I need your support. Now, I know that Lynn is so gracious and wonderful to come and share her time and talent with us, but I think that you who are enjoying the yoga will get much more out of it if you put something back into it. So I'm asking you, it's not a requirement, but if you can give $5, $10 to the yoga class, and it's certainly, Lynn is welcome to do it that if she chooses to do it, which she has chosen for HeartLight at this time. Sunday, we're continuing Chakra 2, Part 2. We got more to say, always. So we will be doing our Chakra 2 message on Sunday. Okay, anybody have anything? You just got a few minutes. I think we're out? Yeah. So thank you that are joining us. We thank you for your support and faithfulness to the class. Anybody have